Tonight, Florida's two candidates for U.S. Senate finally come face-to-face. Incumbent Senator Marco Rubio, challenger Congresswoman Val Demings square off live on WFLA News Channel 8 and live here on WFLA Now, your local election headquarters. Hey there, folks. JB here with you live in the WFLA Now Stream Center. You see it there in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. The debate starts in approximately 25 minutes from right now. And if you're watching this live stream, you don't have to go anywhere. We're going to be breaking it down here for you as far as what to expect. Rubio versus Demings at Palm Beach State College. Joining me here in the Stream Center, a big thank you in advance to our two analysts joining us on stream tonight. On the top right-hand portion of your screen, it's Tom Lee, who served in the Florida Senate from 1996 to 2006, again from 2012 to 2020, president of the Florida Senate from 2004 to 2006, Republican nominee for CFO in 2006 as well. And Tom, it's great to see you. Great to be joined by you here on stream. Looking forward to hearing from you, as well as Jim Davis, who some of our viewers might recognize as well. Majority Leader from in the Florida House from 1995 to 1996, served in Congress 1997 to 2007, representing Florida's 11th congressional district, and also the Democratic nominee for governor here in Florida in 2006. This is a long way of saying that you guys are very much appreciated and bring a lot of wealth of just knowledge, political knowledge here in the state of Florida to this table as we're here live in the WFLA Now Stream Center. So allow me to just say welcome. Welcome, and what are we anticipating tonight? Tom, why don't we start with you? All eyes on Florida, all eyes on Palm Beach State College tonight for the incumbent, Rubio, a name that I'm sure most people across the country know quite well, somebody who has run for president here in this country. And then you have Val Demings, lesser known nationally, but here in Florida, people know her, of course, as being the police chief in Orlando, a congresswoman in Central Florida as well. What are you watching for tonight at Palm Beach State College?
Well, I think you can expect that Senator Rubio will focus on the things that are most important in the polling that we're all seeing around the country on the issues matrix that concern people, which is primarily the economy and crime and the border. Those are the things that are polling the highest in terms of the focus of this election. And I suspect you'll hear him talk a lot about what he has done in response to the pandemic, some of the things he's accomplished for the Everglades, some of the work that he's done expanding the child tax credit in Congress. And I think he'll be contrasting himself. This is a great opportunity for Representative Demings. She isn't as well known, and I think she needs to put some points on the board here tonight and show that she's ready for prime time as a member of the United States Senate. It's a big night, and it's an exciting night. Let's bring in Jim. Jim, talking about Demings, both of you have at one stage in your careers been at this point as far as, 23 minutes ahead of a debate, Jim, as far as what is Val Demings and her team thinking right now with less than half an hour to go here?
I think it's an exciting time for her because her job's a little different tonight. She's still introducing herself. This race has turned out to be a lot closer than people expected, probably because she's raised so much money. She's been able to introduce herself on TV as a former chief of police and a former police officer and somebody who's really lived the American dream. I mean, her parents were a maid and a janitor, but people really haven't seen her in action. And so I think this is a chance for her to talk about who she is, her values. And I agree with Tom, what issues are important. She'll be talking about some different issues. She'll also be talking about the abortion issue because Senator Rubio staked out a position pretty far to the right on that. And Floridians disagree, but I think they'll be interested in hearing both of them talk about why they believe as they do and why they have voted as they have on some of the critical issues affecting Florida and the economy.
As you see here, everybody, you got the hashtags on your screen. This is interactive coverage of tonight's debate. So you see hashtag HeyJB. Our audience members might have seen that hashtag before. There's hashtag HeyTom, hashtag HeyJim as well. We're live across multiple platforms, and if you use one of those hashtags with your comment, you might have a question. You might have an observation about something that we're talking about here, or you might have an observation about the candidates themselves. We'll be looking for those hashtags in our comment section and bringing you into our conversation here in just a short time. Before we do that, though, before we start to look out for your comments, I want to bring in Keith Kate, who, of course, has been previewing, and he is there live tonight at Palm Beach State College. So Keith has been talking about this debate over the last several days on WFLA News Channel 8 and joins us with the very latest.
There is a lot riding on tonight's debate for both candidates. Representative Val Demings needs a good showing because she's trailing in the polls. Senator Marco Rubio needs to perform well because he's up against a candidate who's not holding back as this race nears the finish line. Now, I expect both to be trading jabs and not pulling punches, especially when it comes to who's tougher on crime. Demings has spent months highlighting her tenure as Orlando police chief, while Rubio has spent just as long showcasing his support from law enforcement. Another issue that could create some sparks tonight, Demings' attack on Rubio when it comes to abortion rights. She's been running ads going after Rubio for wanting to criminalize abortions with no exceptions for rape or incest. Rubio did co-sponsor a bill to ban abortions nationally after 15 weeks. And this race is being watched closely around the country, too, because the stakes couldn't be higher for both parties. You have the Democrats trying desperately to maintain control of the Senate, but they feel the pressure from the Republicans. A handful of states could go either way. Now, Florida not expected to be one of them, but that does not mean Val Demings and the Democrats can't pull off the upset. And that's why they are spending millions to unseat Republican incumbent Marco Rubio. Tonight, I'm going to be reporting live from the Senate debate at Palm Beach State College on the Lake Worth campus. It's Demings versus Rubio, and you can only see it right here exclusively on News Channel 8, your local election headquarters.
Keith reporting for us and filing that report this morning. As we, again, welcome in Tom Lee, Jim Davis, and we already have some hashtag Hey Tom and Jim questions and comments that are coming in. And before we get to those comments, Tom, we'll throw things back over to you as we hear Keith talk about some of the issues. We're about to get into the issues at hand here and some of the issues that we might be hearing in about 19 minutes from now. But what is the issue that you think Floridians want to hear the very most between Demings and Rubio tonight?
Oh, I think without question what Floridians want to hear from these candidates is what vision they have to fix our economy. People vote their pocketbook. Americans aren't better off than they were a couple of years ago today, and that needs to change. And having a plan for what you're going to do, highlighting your voting record on what you have done to date to try to prop up this economy in challenging times, I think is going to be really important to the ears of Floridians.
Jim, same question. The number one issue for Floridians.
I think there's several issues, but let's talk about the economy because I agree with Tom, that's important. I think folks will be looking for solutions. I think people are pretty turned off by politics. You look at these ads, it already feels like Halloween, trying to scare the voters. And I think what Representative Demings is going to talk about is some of the things she's specifically done in Congress that are making a difference in people's lives. A couple of the examples, the infrastructure bill that she voted for, Senator Rubio opposed, is going to provide, and already is, very important funding to Florida for our heavily congested roads. We've got safety issues, pedestrian issues, and vehicle issues. Also money for broadband for rural areas. Another issue, which I think is you're definitely going to hear about tonight, is the Medicare prescription drug benefit issue. For the first time, the pharmaceutical industry lost the fight, and we will be able, as taxpayers, to enjoy the benefits of negotiating lower prices for Medicare. This is going to help seniors a lot. These two candidates are on opposite sides of this issue, and it's another very important issue for a lot of Florida seniors and their families that are hurting right now.
And you expect to hear about that tonight?
There is no question in my mind. This was a huge fight, and Senator Rubio has staked out a position against the discount, and I'm certain that he will have the opportunity to explain his position, and she will hammer him on that and the benefits it provides to Floridians and why she voted for it.
Let's get to some of the questions and comments that are coming in. This is interactive coverage pre-debate, as we are now 17 minutes and change away from the debate starting. You can use any of the hashtags on your screen to have your comment featured on screen just like this. We'll go to Bev Howard, and this is coming your way, Jim, asking, will Rubio be asked why he has the worst attendance of any other senator or where we are with the daylight savings bill that did not get passed? Rubio has been attacked and criticized for his attendance record as far as being seated for U.S. Senate for important moments. Do you anticipate Val Demings using that tonight and bringing that up once or multiple times?
So Bev's been watching the television. That is a key issue for Representative Demings. And I will tell you that I think what's behind that issue is that Floridians want a leader with a backbone. And I believe Representative Demings has that, and folks will judge Senator Rubio for themselves. And And the way that Representative Demings has communicated that is Senator Rubio's voting record, a lot of which is tied to when he ran for president, missed a lot of votes. The daylight savings bill, not so much, Bev. I mean, it is, having served in Congress, it's very difficult to pass a bill, particularly something fundamental as that. It's a bipartisan issue. But I think that he has touted himself as one of the most effective U.S. senators. That's political talk. And I think she will push back on that, again, using issues that are important to Floridians, like funding for our economy and the prescription drug bill.
Let's send this over to Tom. Tom, I'd like to ask you about this. If you're Marco Rubio tonight and you're Marco Rubio's team, you're preparing for the inevitable, or what is likely the inevitable attack on your record as far as your voting record. What is your defense? How do you prepare for that, and what do you think is his go-to rationale for that rhetoric, of course, that's going to be established that we anticipate by Val Demings?
Well, I think he said it well. Congresswoman Demings is down in the polls. She's going to have to come out swinging. You have to be careful how much of that you do, because I do think that Floridians want solutions, not just a bunch of back and forth and negativity. We have enough of that in the political dialogue these days. But I think Senator Rubio is articulate and capable of defending his own record. I think he's accomplished a lot of things in the United States Senate. I think Jim's right. A lot of his voting record in the Senate does stem back to the time when he was running for president of the United States and almost became the Republican nominee for president. And so you can't be two places at once. But I think Senator Rubio is one of the most adept communicators I have ever witnessed in my 25 years in politics. And I think he can handle himself and will have an effective response to any of these attacks.
I'm also curious, too, about the emotions that we're going to be seeing tonight. And we know that Val is somebody who can get quite fiery as far as her passions, and, of course, can be extraordinarily vocal when it comes to the opinions, or excuse me, the matters that she has a very, very strong opinion on. Not that Rubio isn't, but I think that we might see more of an animated sort of style and demeanor from Val tonight versus Rubio, who based on previous debate performances, is more, cool, calm, and collected when it comes to delivering the points that he wants to deliver to his audience. Again, we're here live. Let's put away Bev's comment. We'll be looking for some other #HeyTom, #HeyJim questions and comments that are coming in from our growing YouTube Live audience. If you're just joining us, JB, Tom Lee, Jim Davis joining us here, providing perspective on what is going to be, I'm sure, an interesting debate between Val Demings and Marco Rubio. And I think that we're about to be able to show you the debate stage here in just a moment. I just had a comment that came in a moment ago, and I'm going to see if I can bring this up on our screen. And let's see, it's coming in from, Mama Carol. #HeyJim. I don't like either of these candidates. Is anyone else running? And you can't help but laugh, because this is going to be, you could copy and paste this comment with almost virtually any other race in the country going on now or decades past. But really, Jim, this is a race that's coming down to two very experienced politicians. And let's talk about the law enforcement background that Val Demings brings in here, because that is something that she is running heavily on, her law enforcement background, being the former police chief in Orlando. Marco Rubio has, of course, run advertisements talking about his support from the law enforcement community. And there's no doubt tonight that's going to be a significant theme, is her law enforcement background.
Can I first respond to Mama Carol?
Absolutely.
Great name.
Please.
So Mama Carol is watching the debate, so that's a good thing. So she intends to vote, even though she doesn't like both the candidates, I guess, which is also a good thing. The country is divided right now. I think it's fair to say historically, and we need leaders who bring us together. That's one of the things that I'm looking for tonight, and I don't think either party has a monopoly on that. And I hope that's something that's important to her, and maybe one of the reasons why she's so disenchanted. With respect to Representative Demings, who I know well, and I also have worked with Senator Rubio when I was in Congress, she is a cop. If you meet her, if you see her, and I think as you watch tonight, she is thick and through. That's who she is. She was on the police force in Orlando for over 20 years. She was chief of police for 4 years. That's who she is. She is somebody who believes that service is one of the most honorable things that can be done. She is a person of her word. She could have missed a lot of votes in Congress by signing an affidavit that said there was a COVID issue. She did not do that. She got a late start partly because she was very focused on voting and showing up for work. That's apart from the rhetoric about Senator Rubio, that's who Val Demings is. And I think that I hope people tonight, including Mama Carol, get to see the character of the person.
There was a lot of talk before things really kicked off with the 2022 election year as to whether or not Val Demings was going to be a player in some other races, just because, of course, she got a lot of publicity being an impeachment manager up in Washington. There was some talk as to even whether or not that she could run in the gubernatorial race and run against Governor DeSantis. But here she is. How big of a long shot is she, Tom, as far as this race? There are some people who are looking past Florida who are saying it's not even really on the table. But, of course, you're a Republican analyst tonight. Is that short-sighted? Is there a chance that she pulls off the upset? The poll numbers show it's about a 6 to 7, depending on the poll that you look at, 6 to 7 percentage points of a difference. That's a pretty considerable lead for Rubio. But Demings is spending a lot of money. We're talking $40 million, in excess of $40 million on this campaign, a lot of money coming in. So is she that much of a long shot in your view?
Well, she got out early. And as Jim pointed out earlier, it's not easy when your opponent defines you to have to undo that and change the trajectory of your image. And she got out early and attacked Senator Rubio. And so I don't think money's going to be the issue in this race, though. I think that in Florida, a qualified candidate has a puncher's chance in any of these statewide races. But I don't see her being able to get over the hurdle that she's going to have to get over. If you see her talk a lot about being a former police chief, it may be because she hasn't gotten much done in Congress, and she peaked as a police chief, and that may be her highlight reel. But when she was interviewing for vice president, she had some pretty different comments to make about defunding the police. She thought it was thoughtful. And she was very empathetic to when these riots were taking place. And that's why I think all these sheriffs have come out and backed Senator Rubio here in this race, despite her law enforcement background.
I want to talk to you guys about the two names that we have not brought up yet on this live stream. And our audience might be shocked by the fact that we haven't brought up these two names because they are undoubtedly going to get brought up tonight. I'm talking about the de facto leaders of each party. I'm talking about President Joe Biden. I'm talking about former President Donald Trump. If you're Rubio, there's obviously a very unique dynamic, I think, Tom. It's a fair way to say between Rubio and Trump.
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yes.
I think so.
Indeed.
And if you're Demings, how closely you associate yourself with the current president of the United States, whose approval ratings have improved since 6 months prior, Jim. How much of a distance you create between yourself and the current president of the United States. Those are going to be interesting themes tonight to watch for, correct?
Well, Val Demings is a fiercely independent person. And I think you folks can judge that for themselves tonight. But I also think she doesn't shy away from controversy. So I would not expect her to be distancing herself from the president. She knows him. The president has tremendous respect for her. That's why she was considered for vice president. Senator Rubio has been a little more flexible. He has been on both sides of President Trump's character and his positions. Lately, he's been defending the president on many levels. But I think it's a good way to judge both candidates tonight is how they respond. But remember, at the end of the day, this is not about President Biden or Trump, because the person we elect here is going to serve past President Biden. They're going to serve for the next 6 years. And this is somebody who we are going to count on when there's a hurricane, when we're dealing with climate change, when we're dealing with seniors that can't afford drug prices, when we're dealing with immigration and growth. This is our person, not the president, our United States Senator.
As far as the same question with President Donald Trump and the looming question as to whether or not he's going to run in 2024, of course, Governor DeSantis' name gets tossed about quite a bit, Tom. So do you anticipate that is sort of just the overall encompassing strategy of the Republican Party coming out tonight and being on display, or is this really just about Rubio's track record as a sitting U.S. senator?
Well, I think it's going to be much less about Donald Trump than it will be about President Biden. He is the president under which our current economic climate has occurred. He may not be entirely responsible. We could go on CNBC and have that conversation. in great depth, and I have followed it in great depth. There have been a lot of contributory factors to where we find ourselves in the economy, but it has blown up on his watch. And you have to own it when the buck stops with you as President of the United States. So, unfortunately, the environment we're operating in is going to make President Biden a much bigger campaign issue than Donald Trump will be. And despite her independence, Val Demings has voted with the president 100% of the time while she's been in Congress.
Jim?
Normally, I would agree with Tom that it's really about the sitting president, but because of what happened on January 6th and the shadow of Donald Trump over that, I think we are going to hear more about Donald Trump, because I've heard Representative Demings talk about this, and it may not be popular in the polls, but I will tell you, she believes thick and through that what happened on January 6th, including to her fellow law enforcement officers, is really unforgivable, and that we need to make sure it never happens again. And I think Donald Trump bears a lot of culpability for that in her views, and I think you're going to hear that tonight, and it's really about her character and her leadership, not about what the polls say.
I'd like to ask you both, because we have 1 hour tonight to get through so many topics. First, and really quickly, does that hour, you guys are debate veterans, does that hour go by fast, or is it a slow hour?
It goes by fast.
It goes by fast, right? So it's 1 hour, it's 60 minutes for everybody to pay attention to the issues. But how much we actually get to hear about the issues is always a question before every debate, because people want to hear about issues and solutions to those issues. But if it just becomes an attack one way against the other, and before you know it, they're throwing barbs about January 6th and Donald Trump, and before you know it's back and forth, and we're off on a tangent. Obviously, the moderators are going to be trying to keep this thing on the tracks, keep this train on the track, so to speak. But how much do you anticipate things being about solutions tonight rather than attacks on one another?
Well, I keep in mind that the issues we're facing right now may not be the same issues next year. I mean, who would have thought that we've had to face this horrific disaster on Southwest Florida? And who would have thought COVID was coming? So it really is about the character of the person, who best represents our values as Floridians. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, particularly for an undecided voter. And the other thing I'd say is Representative Demings bears a little bit different burden than Senator Rubio because he's the incumbent. She's still introducing herself. And I think Tom's right. She needs to talk about what she's done, not just as chief of police, but also what she's done in Congress and what that tells us about the type of senator she would be.
Do you think that it stays focused on the issues tonight, Tom?
Well, I tell you, if it doesn't, I'll be disappointed. The moderators have a difficult challenge sometimes, as we saw in some of these presidential debates. They're a little bit like a referee in a prize fight. You want to let the fighters fight, but if there's filibusters going on and people dodging questions, I think the moderators have a responsibility and an obligation for the viewers to weigh in and point that out and bring the focus back into the issues. Hopefully we don't get into that tonight too much, but I think the moderators can have a productive effect on making sure that we stay focused on responding to the questions that are being asked.
Again, a lot to jam pack into 1 hour. So we're really hoping that we get to hear about a lot of these issues. And really quickly, Jim, I'm going to come back to you here in just a second. I just want to show this to our audience really quickly, because we ran an interactive poll on WFLA.com asking people what the top issue you want addressed in the state of Florida and what you would like to see discussed tonight on the debate stage. Number one, without really any close call here, is inflation and the economy. Number two, abortion. That we saw an uptick in that today when we were talking about this poll on WFLA News Channel 8. Housing costs and immigration coming through as third and fourth place. Not too much about Social Security and healthcare, important issues, but still it was mostly inflation, the economy, abortion, housing costs, and immigration, as I would imagine you guys would expect. Jim, you were going to make a point, and I would just like to give you an opportunity.
I want to follow up on something Tom said, which I think is really important, which is if you're not decided, which is great if you're watching this debate, pay most close attention to the follow-up question. Because the first question gives the candidate a chance to say what they want to say. The second question, if the moderator is doing their job, is where you really get to find out where the candidate is. And that to me is the mark of a good debate, that we really get into the grist here a little bit. On your pie chart, a lot of that is going to influence who bothers to come out to vote. Let's be hopeful that it's not just hardcore Republicans and defendants that are coming out to vote. It's independents and people that are truly focused on what's good for the state, not just a particular political party.
And if we're talking about the audience here, and let's bring everybody back on screen, we're welcoming in a new digital audience. Hello there to you. JB Buno here with you live in the Stream Center alongside Tom Lee, Jim Davis. We're breaking down what to expect tonight in Demings versus Rubio. The debate, of course, exclusively tonight on WFLA News Channel 8. We're also doing interactive streaming here on WFLA Now across all of our social media platforms. We've got about a minute plus before things get underway. Really quickly, Tom, a chance to respond to anything that Jim had to say and your response to inflation and the economy being the number one issue that Floridians want answers on tonight.
Those are the big issues. I mean, it's the issue of the hour is what are you going to do about this economy? The Federal Reserve has been late to the party here to try to fix this economy. They waited too long, and now they're having to manufacture a recession through increases in interest rates and tightening of monetary policy. And it's creating other effects with people's 401ks and in the stock market and the bond market. So it's been a double whammy of a problem, and that's what Americans are feeling right now. And
we'll show you here, folks. This is live from Palm Beach State College, where, of course, Marco Rubio, Val Demings have taken to their respective sides of the stage, and the debate starting now in less than 10 seconds. Allow me to just remind our audience really quickly, after the debate concludes, we'll be breaking it down. Tom, Jim, myself will be here with you live on WFLA Now across all platforms to talk about who won tonight's debate from Palm Beach State College.
Live from the campus of Palm Beach State College in Lake Worth Beach, Florida. This is a WPBF 25 special presentation. Senator Marco Rubio, Congresswoman Val Demings, Decision 2022, Before You Vote, U.S. Senate Debate, made possible by Florida Press Association, these proud partners, and statewide sponsors. Now, tonight's moderator, WPBF 25 news anchor, Todd McDermott.
Good evening, and welcome to our audience from around the entire state, live on television, streaming and listening on NPR Florida. This is Decision 2022, Before You Vote, the U.S. Senate Debate. We are live from Duncan Theater on the Lake Worth Beach campus of Palm Beach State College. Welcome to our candidates, Congresswoman Val Demings and Senator Marco Rubio. We are so appreciative for your participation tonight. Also joining me are panelists, Vicki Sacheri, Executive Editor of Florida Trend, and Rick Christie, Executive Editor of the Palm Beach Post. All three of us will be asking questions of the candidates tonight. The debate rules tonight: each candidate gets 60 seconds to answer a question and 30 seconds to answer any follow-up questions. Rebuttals are 30 seconds in length and at my discretion as your moderator. Candidates, when you see the yellow light, you have 15 seconds to finish. The red light means exactly what you think it means. And I'll remind you that it means stop. Congresswoman Demings, you won the coin toss earlier this week. The first question tonight goes to you. 3 weeks ago tomorrow, Hurricane Ian hit Florida as one of the 5 most powerful storms to make landfall in the U.S. What federal action is needed starting now to protect Florida from sea levels projected to rise a foot or more in less than 30 years, while more frequent monster storms threaten our lives and livelihoods?
Well, thank you so much for that question, and let me say good evening to all of you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Palm Beach State College. It is an honor for me to be here. I stand on this stage as the daughter of a maid and a janitor who grew up in Florida. Had the honor of serving as the police chief in the House, and now standing on this stage. I grew up in Florida, so I know all too well the devastating effects that hurricanes can cause on our state. And number one, we have got to get serious about climate change. Climate change is real. If we don't do something about it, then we're going to pay a terrible price for it. More intense storms like we've seen, as the waters in the ocean continue to warm up, more intense storms, more flooding, more just devastation as we've seen with Ian. I've toured the area, and I've toured Puerto Rico and seen what Fiona did. The federal government has got to make sure that FEMA has the resources that it needs to adequately respond, but we've got to get serious about climate change.
Thank you very much. Senator Rubio, the same question as you. I'll repeat the question. It was 3 weeks ago tomorrow, Hurricane Ian hit, one of the 5 most powerful hurricanes to ever make landfall in our country. Federal action starting now to protect Florida against sea level rise projected up to a foot in less than 30 years while these monster storms just continue to hit us.
First of all, I also want to thank the college for hosting us here tonight, all of you for being a part of it, everyone for being here in the audience. This is important. I'm glad we have a chance to do it. You ask about the hurricanes. Unfortunately, if you're in public service in Florida, you won't be here long before you're dealing with hurricanes, and we've done so consistently throughout my time in public service. And unfortunately, back in 2017, we had devastating storms, 2018 as well, and now the devastation and destruction that we're still calculating. I outlined last week a very specific plan, obviously it's preliminary, on all the sorts of things that we're going to need help on. These communities immediately need emergency relief. What's happening for a lot of these cities and counties is they have to spend a lot of money up front. Money out of their budgets they have to spend right now to pay for these things, and then they get reimbursed. And so that's why I'm very proud that in 2017 and again in 2018, I was able to get President Trump and the federal government to fully reimburse our counties for the help they needed. But we'll have to do more. There'll be 2 phases. The first is emergency response, meaning all the things you need as an emergency to help these counties backfill their needs. And then there'll be the long-term recovery. And I'm very proud of the fact that I was involved deeply in all the long-term recovery efforts of the last storms as well.
All right, that's time, sir. Thank you. We're going to move on to question number 2. And Senator, this question begins with you. Democrats passed the $2 trillion American Rescue Plan with no Republican support. Now inflation rates, not seen in 40 years, show no clear sign of abating. Prices for just about everything, housing, gasoline, groceries, are way up. A Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco analysis shows injecting trillions of dollars in pandemic relief into this economy caused up to 3% of what is approaching a 9% U.S. inflation rate. And it's worse in Florida. What can you do to help families now?
Well, I think the first thing we have to start doing is stop spending that kind of money. We had already done 2 pandemic reliefs. This came on top of it. And they were warned. The Democrats were warned by Larry Summers, by other Democrat economists, you do this, you're going to fire up inflation. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we've got to begin to produce American oil again. Why are we begging Saudi Arabia for oil? Why are we begging Venezuela and Iran for oil? We're producing 1 million barrels a day less on oil than we used to do just a couple years ago. Instead, we are depleting our reserves. Our oil reserves do not exist to win midterms. They exist to help this country in an emergency or in the midst of a storm. What we cannot do is some of these crazy policies that are coming from the left that Congresswoman Demings has supported. You know, she supported a plan to put a $10.25 tax per barrel of oil, which would have been 35 cents per gallon more for everyone listening here today. We can't do that kind of crazy stuff. It only adds to the inflation. I think it begins by winning this election and getting people like that out of office.
And that's time. Congresswoman, the same question you may answer, but you have 60 seconds to answer this question.
Thank you so much for that. Of course, the senator who has never run anything at all but his mouth would know nothing about helping people and being there for people when they are in trouble. No one planned the pandemic, but our response to it is everything. Individuals were hurting, families were hurting, businesses were hurting. We passed the CARES Act, which the senator supported. There were some problems in the CARES Act with the Paycheck Protection Program that you love to take credit for. Some say it was poorly written. Some say it didn't help the people that it was supposed to, didn't save the jobs that it was supposed to. There was a way to fix the problems in the PPP through the American Rescue Plan and help people that were in trouble. But you played politics, Senator, and you did not do that. Your number 1 job as a United States Senator is to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the American people. You've been at it for 24 years.
Senator Rubio.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, we passed the Paycheck Protection Plan when Democrats were sitting at home in the House. They were in their pajamas doing Zoom calls, and we were in the Capitol. And we were working in the Capitol to solve real problems. The Paycheck Protection Program was a bipartisan victory. If we hadn't put that plan together, and we had to do it very quickly, in a Capitol that had no staff, we had to put it together in 3 or 4 days, bipartisan. It got unanimous support, including the Congresswoman who voted, I guess, remotely or whatever they did. Because the truth of the matter is that if we hadn't done that, we would have had a meltdown. We would have had a meltdown in this country. We saved millions of small businesses. I am incredibly proud. It is a bipartisan achievement. Had we not done it, we would have had a depression in this country. The Congresswoman likes to talk about helping people. She's never passed a bill. She's never passed a single bill. She's been in Congress for over half a decade. She's never passed a bill, not PPP, not anything. Not a single bill she's passed has ever become law. I'm proud of the fact we saved millions of jobs. I'm proud of the fact we did it in a bipartisan way.
That's not true. I know the senator, look, and I'm really disappointed in you, Marco Rubio, because I think there was a time when you did not lie in order to win. I don't know what happened to you. You know that is not true. My first term in the United States House, I passed legislation to help law enforcement officers with mental health programs. Your first term in the Senate, you voted to turn Medicare into, basically to abolish it, and then turn it into an underfunded voucher program. And then you gave the biggest tax break to the richest of the rich and said you'd pay for it with cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
Running out of time, I'll give you 30.
No, this is an important topic. So number one, and we'll fact check it. I'm going to put it on my website now, and all of you can love, the media loves to fact check. There is not a single federal law on the books that she sponsored and got passed. Not one. I think she named 2 post offices. I've done that too. But she's not passed a single federal law. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the tax, you know what we did in 2017? Do you know why today in Florida and across the country, working parents have a double child tax credit from what they used to have? Because I single-handedly got it passed. Because I took on my own party, even the editorial boards had to recognize it. I took on my own party and we doubled the child tax credit. And I took on my own party, the Wall Street Journal, even corporate interests. So I'm very proud of my record. In the last 12
you there, Senator.
Todd, may I respond
Again,
to that?
Congresswoman, yes.
Look, the senator has obviously resorted to lying, cheating, and trying to steal. But it's embarrassing that you think that honoring a person who is a hero by naming a federal building after them is nothing. I think honoring a police officer who was killed in the line of duty is everything, Senator. It matters to his family, it matters to his community, it matters to his department, it matters to me. I think it's sad that it doesn't really matter to you.
Both of you, we need to move on.
I know, but I did not say it didn't matter. I said that that's all she's done. That's all I said. That's all she's done.
Well,
I, on the other hand, have saved millions of jobs.
We're going to move on.
And by the way, the lying and the cheating, the lying will be the lying is going to be fact checked. I'm not sure where I'm cheating or stealing.
The next topic, and the question goes to you, Senator.
All right, great.
In an August interview, Senator, you said, quote, abortion is the killing of an unborn human being, and that you do not believe the dignity and the worth of human life is tied to the circumstances of their conception. You've now signed on to fellow Senator Lindsey Graham's bill for a national abortion ban. My question to you specifically is, if reelected, if your vote can make a federal abortion ban with no exceptions the law of the land, will you vote yes?
Number one, I'm 100% pro-life, not because I want to deny anyone their rights, but because I believe that innocent human life is worthy of the protection of our laws. That said, every bill I've ever sponsored on abortion, every bill I've ever voted for, has exceptions. Every one of them does, because that's what can pass, and that's what the majority of people support. Now, what was before us today in Congress that you talk about Lindsey Graham's bill, that's a 4-month ban. Okay? That is more lenient than every country in Europe, except for 2. The extremist on abortion in this campaign is Congresswoman Demings. She supports no restrictions, no limitations of any kind. She voted against she's against a 4-month ban. She voted against a 5-month ban. She supports taxpayer-funded abortion on demand for any reason at any time up until the moment of birth. That's what she supports. That's the extreme position here. I have shown a willingness to work with people to save unborn innocent human life. She opposes any limitation of any kind, and no one ever asks them about that.
Congresswoman Demings.
Senator, how gullible do you really think Florida voters are? Number one, you have been clear that you support no exceptions, even including rape and incest. Now, as a police detective who investigated cases of rape and incest, no, Senator, I don't think it's okay for a 10-year-old girl to be raped and have to carry the seed of her rapist. No, I don't think it's okay for you to make decisions for women and girls. As a senator, I think those decisions are made between the woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith. And to sit over, or to stand over there and say that I don't support abortions up to the time of birth is just a lie. But to help protect the life of the mother, which you looked at that like it was just, that's kind of a side issue. Senator, you know that you have said you don't support any exceptions. But what you're saying tonight...
Yeah, number one, the bill that she's attacking me on has exceptions. It has exceptions. That's the bill right now. Number two, you want to talk about extreme? Let me tell you about extreme, because you talk about extreme. Here's extreme. Okay? A child that's born alive after a failed abortion. It happened 11 times in Florida in 2017. It happened 8 times in 2020. A child on a failed abortion born alive. And we had doctors in America that refused to treat or provide medical care to a child born alive. And we tried to pass a law that said that should be a crime. That's infanticide. The abortion failed. The child was born alive and you refused to treat it. And she voted against that. That's how extreme she is. And she still will not tell you. You should ask her, what limits on abortion will you support?
Congresswoman?
What we know is that the senator supports no exceptions. He can make his mouth say anything today. He's good at that, by the way. What day is it, and what is Marco Rubio saying? I've said time and time again, and he knows it, that I support a woman's right to choose up to the time of viability.
Senator, before we go, I want to get back to the original question, because I understand that you said you have supported legislation that has exceptions, and that this particular bill that Lindsey Graham has drafted, you signed on to, does have that up to 4 months. But I asked you a specific question, that is, if you get the chance in another 6-year term to vote for a federal abortion ban with no exceptions, would you vote yes if it would make it the law?
No, listen, I've already told people what I don't believe that the value of a human life is determined by the circumstances.
Right,
under which
I gave
But
that
the law that can pass in this country, I'm interested in saving human lives. And that's why every law that's out there has exceptions, including the one that she's attacking me on has exceptions. Every law I've ever passed has exceptions. We're never going to get a vote on a law that doesn't have exceptions, because that's what the majority of the American people are. And I respect and understand that. And that's what I support. But she's still, you haven't asked her, no one here's asked her, she still won't answer what specific limits. She's never voted for a limit, not after 4 months, not after 5 months. And by the way, on the issue of exceptions, I'm being attacked on a bill that has exceptions. It's written right in there. My name is on that bill. My name is on that bill. There's a reason why no bills are ever introduced without exceptions.
That was asked,
because that can't pass without that in there, and I understand and recognize it, and that's why I have continued to support bills that have exceptions. But she supports no limits of any kind. That is out of the mainstream. That is radical. She supports letting a doctor let an unborn baby, a born baby born alive, and the doctor doesn't have to treat it?
That's time. Another minute to you, Congresswoman Demings.
Marco Rubio has been clear that he supports no exceptions, even in the cases of rape and incest. He said it time and time and time again. But what I can say to him, and I can say to Florida, we are not going back, Senator, no matter how obsessed you are with the woman's body and her right to choose. We are not going back to a time where women are treated like second-class citizens or like property. And I'll say it again, because obviously he didn't hear or he doesn't want to. I support a woman's right to an abortion up to the time of viability.
So, can you ask if she'll support a 24-week ban? Will you support a 24-week ban? Because you didn't support a 20-week ban. You didn't support...
Up to the time of viability.
But when is that? That's the vague language they all give. And then they talk about the doctor and the family. Let me tell you who else is in that room, that abortion room. The government is in that room because she brought them in there. She wants the taxpayer to pay for that abortion. That's government involvement. Not just to pay for that abortion, but to pay for them all over the world.
For a woman and our girls.
That's a radical...
I believe at this point we're going to move on.
My watch.
I'm going to ask that you both allow me to move on with this debate.
We still didn't hear what limits she supports.
This next question comes from Rick Christie, executive editor of the Palm Beach Post.
Good evening, Congresswoman Demings. Just today, a New York Times Siena College poll shows voters overwhelmingly believe American democracy is under threat. A Washington Post analysis shows election deniers are running for office in 48 of 50 states. The New York Times poll also shows more than 2 in 5 registered voters, including 37% of independent voters, are at least somewhat comfortable in voting for a candidate who says they don't accept the results of the 2020 election. Will you accept results of the 2022 election?
Let me start here, if I may. My mother, the maid and a janitor, worked long, hard days. but I can never remember a time they did not vote. If our car wasn't working, they would pay somebody a couple of dollars to take them to the polls. Why on earth would we try to stop them from voting? They were able to vote because of our democracy, the wonderful system of government that we have. No, it is not perfect. But our system of government is what allows us to be here tonight. We have to do everything within our power to uphold the Constitution, protect the rule of law, and protect our democracy, and protect each person's, Republican, Democrats, and independents, right to vote. That's what I did as a police officer and a police chief. I took an oath that I would protect and serve, defend the Constitution, not just for people who looked like me or the richest of the rich, but for all people.
All right, Congresswoman, that's time. The same question goes to Senator Rubio.
Yeah, first of all, I don't know who the rich are, because my dad was a bartender at banquets and my mom was a janitor, so we have that in common. And I will tell you this much. I've never denied an election, ever. I've never said an election. I'm not like Stacey Abrams in Georgia that denied her election. I've never denied an election. I think in Florida, we have great election laws, but I think elections have to have rules. And Congresswoman Demings supported this effort to have a federal takeover of elections. What would that look like? You can't ask for ID. You have to ask for ID to get into her neighborhood where she lives, and that you have every right to have that. But you can't ask for it when they vote. Allowing people to drive around with a trunk full of absentee ballots. Allowing people to basically register on an hour before the same day of the election, show up and vote and inject chaos. We have to have rules and we have to have laws. And those laws have to be followed. Florida has good election laws, and we have record turnout, like they had record turnout in Georgia, which they were out there calling some sort of segregationist Jim Crow bill. No, these are rules. These are rules that allow people to have confidence that their vote counted and their vote mattered. They're not suppressing anyone's vote. They are rules designed to make sure the system works the way it's supposed to work.
Let me just get you on record here that you will support the results of the 2022 election.
We have great laws in Florida, absolutely.
But will you?
Sure, because I'm going to
All right,
win,
that's
so I look
done.
forward to supporting that. But
We're moving on.
But yes, no matter what the outcome is, I'll support it because Florida has good laws. They're not the
Fair
crazy
enough.
laws
Let's
like
move
they
on to
have
the
in
next
Pennsylvania
question.
and these other places.
I want to go to Vicki Sashery from Florida Trends Magazine.
I don't think we gave Congresswoman Demings the.
I believe we're going to move on here to the next question, and that's Vicki's question.
Good evening. 6 homeowners insurance companies have already failed in Florida in 2022, putting more pressure on Florida taxpayer-backed Citizens Property Insurance. They're now insuring more than 1 million properties in the state and counting. As the insurer of last resort, the collapse of Citizens would be a catastrophe for Floridians. What should be done on the federal level to avoid this?
Who's the question for?
Senator Rubio.
I'm sorry. Okay, so obviously this is a state issue, but here's a couple things that I would say. The first, the flood insurance program, which is critical. A lot of the people that were hurt in the storm did not have flood insurance. Not only we have to go back and reauthorize it every year. We shouldn't have to keep going back every year. It should be permanent. We should also reform the system. Florida actually pays more into the flood program than it takes out. You talk about the property insurance issue. It is a state issue. The federal government, you don't want the federal government involved in property insurance, believe me, okay? But I will say this to you. We are, I believe the number is about 8 or 9% of the roof claims in America. We are 83% of the roof lawsuits in America. And so what's happening to these insurers is the cost of litigation. They're saying, I'm out in Florida. And look, I worry about it. My property insurance is up at the end of this year. And other people should be worried about it because when your property insurance goes up, if you can't afford it or you don't have it, the mortgage company will force place you. And your mortgage could double. So we are facing a looming crisis. I think it's something the state has to get their arms around, but I am certainly in favor of not just reauthorizing, but reforming the flood program, separate from the wind, the flood program, and reforming it so that Florida is treated fairly.
Senator. Congresswoman, you have 60 seconds to answer this same question. Would you like it repeated?
No, I don't, but thank you so much. Vicki, let me tell you, as the senator works very hard to say it is a state issue, that doesn't mean at the federal level we should not care about what citizens in Florida are going through and try to do something about it. Marco Rubio has spent more time at the state level than certainly any person on this stage. So it's interesting to hear him say how that's such a state issue. Well, what in the heck did he do about it when he was the Speaker of the House or serving? He's been in elected office since 1998, and insurance in Florida has tripled, and people are suffering. I sent a letter to Governor DeSantis saying, yes, I know it's a state issue, but how can we work together to lower the cost of property insurance for Floridians? Because people are suffering. We got to prepare for the next hurricane. Are we going to wait and do nothing? I asked him to call a special legislative session to talk solely about this issue. We have got to get the property
Congresswoman.
insurance
Senator
down.
Rubio, I want to give you 30 seconds to rebut.
Well, first of all, when I was in the state legislature, if we want to go back to that, we actually had a special session, and we passed a reform. You know who the governor was at the time? Charlie Crist, your gubernatorial candidate. I think you've endorsed him. So you should ask him if it didn't work. But we certainly supported it, and we certainly made it happen. So that's number one. Number two, I would say that, trust me when I tell you guys, trust me when I tell you, a federal government that struggles to deliver the mail in a regular and consistent basis in parts of this country, you don't want them in charge of your property insurance. We would be the only state in the country that's asking the federal government to take over their property insurance. Look, do I care about the issue? Yeah, I care about the issue. I'm about to pay $9,000 a year more for property insurance.
That's the 30 seconds. Thank you, Senator. We're going to move on to the next question. This question goes to you, Senator. 5 days ago, the Parkland mass shooter who killed 17 people at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School avoided the death penalty. That shooter and the killer who took 8 lives at an Indiana FedEx facility last year were both 19 years old when they killed. The killers in this year's mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde, Texas were both 18. All used legally purchased AR-style rifles. In the nationally televised CNN town hall 3 days after the Parkland massacre, you said, quote, if you are 18 years of age, you should not be able to buy a rifle. I will support a law that takes that right away. Would you still support that federal law?
Let me tell you why that law doesn't work and why that proposal doesn't work. We had a shooter last Thursday, tragic, in North Carolina. He was 15. Where did he get the gun? He didn't get it from a gun show. He certainly didn't buy it. He's 15 years of age. We've had shootings in the state. Pulse was a terrorist attack. A licensed security guard with a permit to carry firearms, extensive background check. The guy in Parkland, this killer, everybody knew who it was. Even before they announced who the person was, everybody in the community knew who it was because this guy had long problems. He'd been acting up for a long time and everybody knew it. And here's what happened. The sheriff did nothing about it. The school district did nothing about it because they didn't want to arrest kids and fell through the cracks. Even the FBI cracks it fell through. So that's why one of the first things I did when I got back to Washington is I sponsored a bipartisan red flag law, styled after Florida, not the crazy one they just passed, a real red flag law that would allow the police department to go before a judge and remove your guns if they can prove that you are a danger. The one they passed allows some coworker that doesn't like you to go to some liberal judge and take away your Second Amendment rights. So I think the solution to this problem is to identify these people that are acting this way and stop them before they act.
I want to stop you here, Senator, but before I go to Congresswoman Demings, I want to make sure that I understand that what you said in 2018 is not what you believe is the solution today.
I do not believe that
there should not be a ban on 18 or 19 or 20-year-old.
A 15-year-old just got a gun, got a shotgun.
But that's one case. I just want to make sure.
No, it's more than one case. But one in Connecticut also involved the exact same thing.
We could do this all night, but I want to make sure that you don't support that anymore. It is an important point.
Denying the right to buy it is not going to keep them from doing it. Here's the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is why are these kids, why are these people going out there and massacring people?
This is the same.
Because a lot of people own AR-15s and they don't kill everyone.
I understand, sir, but I want to go to Congresswoman Demings for 60 seconds.
You know, people who are the families of victims of gun violence just heard that, and they're asking themselves, what in the hell did he just say? Senator, you used the Pulse nightclub shooting as your inspiration to run again for the Senate in 2016. Pulse is in my district. And yet, you've done nothing to help address gun violence and get dangerous weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. Florida, after Parkland, after you made promises that you had no intentions on keeping to the parents of Parkland, Florida passed legislation raising the age to have an assault weapon, passed red flag laws that we've seen 7,000 plus instances where they've been used now. Our primary responsibility is the safety of Floridians. And Senator, 24 years in elected office, and you have not yet risen to that occasion. And then when asked about it, you say something that makes no sense.
All right, Congressman, thank you. Senator, 30-second rebuttal from you.
Yeah, what makes no sense is that we're going to actually pass laws that only law-abiding people will follow and criminals will continue to violate. The truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, that Americans have a Second Amendment right to protect themselves. They have, and these killers that are out there, if they're intent on killing, as they are, they have found multiple ways to get a hold of weapons and cause mass destruction. Just the other day, he used a shotgun, which wouldn't have been covered by any of these restrictions. I have a bipartisan red flag law sponsored with Senator Jack Reed. But the problem is that the leftists in the Senate and in the House, like Congresswoman Demings, are against it because they want the California red flag law that allows your coworker has a grudge against you and can go to a judge and take away your guns. That I'll never support.
That's the 30. I'm going to overlook Senator-elect Demings. We're going to just blow by that.
I said Sen and then I said
Congresswoman Demings.
Yeah, thank you. Look, every time we talk about responsible gun ownership and legislation that could help protect lives, you pull the Second Amendment out. My father was a gun owner. Has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. This is about taking dangerous guns out of the hands of dangerous people. And the overwhelming majority of people in our nation want us to do just that. How long will you watch people being gunned down in first grade, fourth grade, high school, college, church, synagogue, a grocery store, a movie theater, a mall, and a nightclub,
Congresswoman,
and do nothing?
That is time. I want to give you 30 more seconds, Senator.
Well, everything she's for would have done nothing to stop any of these shootings. Every one of these shooters would have passed the background check that she keeps insisting on. No one here is in favor of mass shootings and violence. And that's why she says we did nothing. That's not accurate. The truth, today, you go to the Department of Homeland Security website, and there's a clearinghouse. She's going to mock it. She shouldn't, because the idea came from a Parkland father. And there's a clearinghouse there that basically tells schools, for example, this is what works for safety and this is what doesn't. And we got that put in there. You know who's trying to take that down? The Biden administration. Because they say that to have a school safety clearinghouse is discriminatory against minority students.
30 more seconds,
Clearinghouse
Congresswoman.
is fine. But Senator Rubio thought that he could reduce this very critical issue to supporting a clearinghouse on the Homeland Security website. And he thought he would get a pass for the mass shootings that we've had in our state and doing nothing significant to do anything about it. Your primary responsibility, Senator, is to protect the safety of the people that you represent.
We just passed the bill they wanted, and there was a shooting a week later, and a week after that.
Why don't we just stop arresting murderers?
The only people that follow these laws are law-abiding citizens.
A rapist,
we are out of
a
time on
robber.
this issue, and in this half of this debate, we've reached halftime, and it is brief. So everybody stay tuned. We have many more issues to get to. You are watching Decision 2022, the U.S. Senate debate for Florida.
Palm Beach State College.
Hey there, folks. JB here with you live in the WFLA Now Stream Center, monitoring, of course, a emotionally charged conclusion to the first half of this debate between Senator Marco Rubio and Congresswoman Val Demings, and emotionally charged, perhaps more on the side of Val Demings, of course, talking there about violence and gun laws in this country. What we're going to do is spend the next minute and a half to ask for some participation from you, wherever you are watching from, in Facebook Live and YouTube Live and those comment sections. What we're going to ask is let you know, or ask you to tell us who you think has so far had the upper hand in the first half of this debate. You can comment for Representative Val Demings by commenting just Demings' name or Val. We'll also look for Marco Rubio. You can comment Marco Rubio or Rubio. Just kind of let's just get the comment section going here and look for some of the comments coming in. Let's also remind our audience that we've got Jim Davis, Tom Lee, our analysts here in the Stream Center. They're hanging out here with us, but their mics are shut off because we want to hear from them after the debate is done, not during the debate itself. So that's coming up here next at the top of the hour when the debate is over at approximately 8 o'clock our time, 8 o'clock Eastern. So I'll look here in the comment section and seeing a lot of Val here on YouTube Live. I'm seeing some Rubio comments come in here as well. Just really quickly going over some of the topics that were brought up. They started with Hurricane Ian, then they went to inflation and the economy, going to abortion next, election confidence, property insurance, and then ending the first half of the debate on violence and gun control. Seeing a lot of Rubio comments come in as I look here over at this screen, paying attention to both Facebook Live and YouTube Live as well. So we're streaming across all platforms. Coming up at, again, 8 o'clock, the top of the hour, Jim Davis, Tom Lee. We break down who won the debate, and we are going to be running an interactive poll to ask you at home who you think was the winner of the debate here at Palm Beach State College. We now take you back live to Palm Beach State College for the, again, second half of the debate, Decision 2022, before you vote.
Welcome back to our debate for U.S. Senate here in the state of Florida. I think we can all agree we touched on a lot of very important emotional issues, and there are many more in this half hour. Senator Rubio, I want to direct this next question to you. This week, the Biden administration changed its policy. Now Venezuelans who cross the southern border will be sent back to Mexico and banned from ever applying for asylum in this country. Do you support that?
You mean Joe Biden just instituted Trump's return to Mexico policy?
There's more to it, but it's
well,
the
there's
ban
not
on
more
ever
to it.
applying.
That's exactly what he did. Look, Congresswoman Demings says that what's happening at the border is nothing unusual. We have 5,000 people a day crossing the border. You know how many people have entered our country illegally since Joe Biden took over as president? 5 million. You know how many have entered this country just in the last 12 months? 2 million. 80 of them on the terror watch list. At least, according to the most generous numbers, at least 1%, meaning 20,000, with serious criminal violations in their record. No country in the world, no one has done more on the issue of Venezuela than I have, and Cuba, and Nicaragua. I sympathize deeply with everything these people are facing, and I blame Maduro for that. But there's no country in the world that can tolerate or permit or afford 5,000 people a day arriving at your border, saying the magic words, and getting asylum. And she says that's not a problem. She says there's nothing unusual about it. This cannot continue. It has to be fixed. He needs not just to do that, that needs to happen with everyone that's trying to come across, or we're going to have 10,000 people a day coming, and we can't afford, no country in the world can tolerate that.
That's time. Congresswoman, I want to give you, this is not a rebuttal, this is the entire 60 seconds as we continue this discussion, and I want to ask you about solutions. Specifically, what solutions do you have for solving the crisis at our southern border?
We are a nation of laws. I've enforced them for 27 years. Despite what the senator wants you to believe, he's living in fantasy land. I've enforced them. And we need to make sure that the men and women at the borders have the resources that they need. I am a fan of boots on the ground. Let's have more boots on the ground, but let's also hire more processors so that we can separate those who need to be arrested from those who are seeking asylum. We're a nation of laws, but we have to enforce the law, but we also obey the law that says people who are in trouble can seek asylum in this country. And so more boots on the ground, more technology, more processors. Let's secure our border. The senator likes to talk about open borders. It's almost an insult to the men and women who are there securing the border. But let's get more agents to help at the border. We can do this.
If I may respond to that. Number one, the only one who's insulted the people working the border are Joe Biden and Democrats who accused them of whipping Haitian migrants, and that turned out not to be true. Number two, she opposed the border wall. She supported this thing called the People's Budget, which I call the crazy people's budget because it had a bunch of crazy stuff in it. Even Charlie Crist voted against it, and that absolutely zeroed out and banned border funding. She talks about more processors. I want you to think about what that means. What that means is now, when someone crosses the border, turns himself in, claims asylum, they're usually held in detention for 2 to 3 days while they process it. What she's arguing is, let's hire more processors so we can get them through faster. So we can push people through instead of 1 day to 3 day detention,
Let me stop
no day
you there,
detention.
Senator,
This can't continue. We have to stop
Let's
this.
ask the Congresswoman to respond to that. You have 30 seconds, Congresswoman.
If we have more processors and they don't meet the standard for asylum seekers, you send them back. Yes, we need to secure our border more. I think we can do that with technology, more boots on the ground, and more people to process those who need to be turned back, those who are breaking the law, from those who are asylum seekers. Senator, enforce the law, but also obey the law as well.
Which boots does she want on the ground? She was against National Guard deployment. They demonized the Border Patrol. And they talk about processors.
Who are you talking about, Senator?
Well, your party.
Who demonized the...
You have, and your party has,
That's
Congresswoman.
a lie.
Absolutely true. And let me tell you something else that they've done. Here's the other thing they've done. They talk about more processors.
Would you be willing to do anything to win, Senator?
They talk about more processors. Okay, so people, everybody, the Biden administration,
you're
all you have to do is
At
say the
this
magic
point,
words.
You're making
At this
it up.
point,
Stop.
this
No,
is devolved. I want to move on to the next
The
issue here,
traffickers give you the
Senator.
magic
Just
words. You're
stop.
saying they let you in.
Congresswoman,
More processors
I
to let
am
them in.
forced to move on at
How
this time.
gullible do you think people are?
The next
Stop.
question is going to come from Vicki Sessions from Florida Trends Magazine. Vicki?
Representative Demings, last year you backed legislation that increased Social Security benefits and would require high-wage earners to pay more in Social Security taxes. Why should Congress raise taxes to pay for a broken system?
Well, number one, we have to think about what the promise of Social Security was. It was to keep our seniors out of poverty. And you know, being in elected office and the critical position of being a United States Senator, it is about making choices to protect people. I believe that we've got to do everything within our power to protect those who have had to go to work every day and deserve to be able to retire with dignity and respect. Governing is about priorities, and Social Security and protecting it is a priority for me. I'm not going to sacrifices, and we need to do what we need to do, whatever that is, to protect it. We can do that.
Follow-up question for Senator Rubio. Florida's junior Senator Rick Scott proposed 11-point plan to rescue America requires, quote, all federal legislation to sunset in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again, Senator Scott says. That includes Medicare, Social Security, and VA benefits. Do you support putting these federal entitlements on a chopping block every 5 years?
No, and that's not my plan. That's Senator Scott. He's doing a great job. He's not very shy. You should ask him. He's more than happy to talk to you about his plan. I can tell you, on the other hand, if you want to talk about radical plans, Congresswoman Demings supported a radical plan. I already mentioned earlier the people's budget. Let me tell you the other gems in that budget. It raised $9 trillion in taxes. $9 trillion in taxes. I already told you about the $10.25 tax on a barrel of oil, which would have meant a 35-cent increase on the gas prices you're already paying right now. Let me tell you what else it did. It zeroed out the war on terror. It took $1 billion out of the Pentagon. This is crazy stuff. And that's not a plan. She voted for it. She didn't just put her name on it. She actually voted for the crazy people's budget, a socialist budget. She voted for it. I don't even know if she remembers she voted for it.
I hadn't seen the socialist budget.
Well, you voted for the people's budget, and it's a socialist budget. Trust me when I tell you that any budget that zeroes out the war on terror, takes $1 trillion out of the Pentagon, okay, raises taxes by $8 trillion on working Americans, is a socialist budget. And she didn't just have her name on it, she voted for it.
That's your time. Congresswoman Demings, 30 seconds to you.
Senator, you're repeating yourself again. We've seen this show before. Socialists, crazy, Marxist, silly.
But which one
that must be on your list for your talking points. The bottom line is you said that Rick Scott's plan, it's good to have good ideas. You did not say that you did not support it. I hear you saying that tonight, but when you were first asked about his plan, you said, I think it's good to have good ideas. You remember that?
Congresswoman, Senator, you can respond.
Yeah, that's Rick Scott's plan. He can defend it, he can talk about it. Her name was on that.
The question
people's
was,
budget.
what do you think
the
about
people's budget? The people's budget had her name on it. She was not just a co-sponsor 2 years in a row. She voted for it. There's never been a vote on Rick Scott's budget. She voted for this thing. $8 trillion in taxes, 8 or 9 trillion, I can't remember at this point. What's another trillion, right? You talk about all the other things that were in there. A $10.25 tax on a barrel of oil so that your prices go up by 35 cents. I don't know what word you prefer, socialist, Marxist, crazy. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions about how we describe such a nutty idea.
Senator,
that would
that's your
destroy the
time. Congresswoman Demings.
He's talking about the barrel of oil again.
Yeah, everyone's talking about the barrel of oil these days.
Look, you've been in elected office in Florida for 24 years. And what we have been left with is skyrocketing property insurance, lack of affordable housing, health care, gone through the roof. We haven't expanded Medicaid. People are hurting. And you know what, Senator, when I talk to your voters around the state, you know what they say? They don't know what you stand for.
All right, Congresswoman, that's your time, and I'm going to move on to the next. We've spent a certain amount of time. I thank you both. I know this had a lot to discuss, but let's move on.
All right.
Congresswoman, this is going to go first to you. President Biden says the world is closer to nuclear Armageddon than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis exactly 60 years ago this month. 3 times in the last week, Vladimir Putin has ordered Russian missile attacks on Ukrainian cities, targeting and killing civilians. If Russia next fires a limited-range tactical nuclear device at Ukraine, or strikes a NATO ally like Poland, even with a conventional weapon, what's the correct response by the Biden White House and NATO?
Well, we have to hold those who are not our friends accountable. And Senator, that does include Russia. It's not just China. Russia has attacked our Ukraine, our friend Ukraine, what they thought was going to be over in a few days, as you know, has been going on for almost a year. We have to continue to support Ukraine and our NATO allies. Of course, we've got to hold Russia accountable. We always use diplomacy around the NATO table. We cannot afford to have a nuclear attack. And the United States has to do everything in its power to prevent that from happening.
Senator, same question to you.
Well, on the first point about Vladimir Putin, I was against Vladimir Putin before being against Vladimir Putin was cool. I mean, and I remember that very well because Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration tried to reset relations with him. Now, I'm not sure the president had to do it over again. He would choose the words Armageddon or Cuban Missile Crisis, but there's no doubt about this. Vladimir Putin is losing this war. And if he loses the war, he'll lose his position. And, you know, I don't think the retirement plan for former Russian dictator presidents is a very good one. So I think he's very concerned about that. So I do think we have to be very wary, and I've warned about this from the beginning, about what he might do to escalate. One is the use of a tactical weapon, which is not a strategic weapon. We're not talking about him launching a missile against Chicago or New York, but we are talking about the use of artillery shells and short-range missiles in the battlefield, which would be unprecedented. And I think the response to that has to be a unified response that perhaps takes out what it is that launched those and where those were launched from. I think the likelier scenario, and the one that really is concerning, is that he would attack, for example, an airport in Poland. At that point, NATO would have to come together and decide whether they're going to invoke Article 5, and the United States needs to live up to its NATO commitments.
Let me ask the Congresswoman, to that point, the NATO response, we know what the NATO charter says. Poland's attacked, as the senator's scenario says, perhaps the airport. What is the response from the United States as well as NATO?
We have to do everything within our power to protect our NATO allies. Everything within our power. If Poland is attacked, then there has to be an immediate response. And I believe between our military and the Department of Defense and our experts and our intelligence community, based on the intelligence on the ground, I believe that that response will be sufficient and swift, but we've got to leave it in the hands of the people who are there and the people who are involved in this every day, with the ultimate goal of keeping America safe and keeping our allies, our NATO friends, safe.
All right, Senator, I have 30 more seconds.
Well, just to add, I think the response needs to be proportional. And what I mean by that is that the NATO alliance will have to meet, and this can't be unilateral. The NATO alliance will have to meet and decide what is a proportional response, and that would depend on the nature and level of the attack. But it has to be an allied response, not simply a U.S. one. That's what's most critical here. It's not anything at our disposal, because we're not talking about the use of strategic weapons or starting World War III, but there needs to be one. I would argue to you tonight that they've already attacked NATO, because the Nord Stream pipeline underwater that supplies Germany from Russia has been bombed. It was bombed. And everyone's wondering, I saw a news report, well, they're saying Russia may have done it. Well, who else did it? Luxembourg,
Senator,
Belgium?
Senator, can you wrap this up in 10 seconds? I need to move on.
All right.
We good?
Yep.
All right, I want to go back to Rick Christie from the Palm Beach Post. Rick?
Congresswoman Demings, Senator Rubio has called Democrats' attempts to pass a new federal voting rights law an effort to, quote, ram through an election law to make sure you never lose power, to make it easier for Democrats to win. Why are new federal protections of voting rights needed?
Well, let me say this. I'm not the person standing on the stage who supports suppressing the right to vote. Look, I can think about the words of my friend and former colleague, John Lewis, who said the right to vote is precious, that is almost sacred. And the senator thinks that we should leave that up to the states. Well, we tried that with voting rights, and we know the bad actors who did some ungodly things to stop people from voting. So we should not just protect the right for a few people or the privileged few. We should protect voting rights for everyone. And we need a federal law to keep everybody accountable. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is sitting in the Senate right now, waiting for a vote. The Freedom to Vote Act, which will help protect the right to vote for all people, is sitting in the Senate right now, waiting for a vote. That is our duty and responsibility, to allow the people to vote.
That's time. Rick, I know you have another question.
This question is for you, Senator Rubio. In January, you wrote in The Federalist that Democrats' push for voting rights is about again, quote, exaggerated problems and imaginary fears, unquote. Can you give us specifics on what you mean by that?
Sure. It's never been easier to
Please.
vote.
I'm sorry? I
It's
didn't hear
never
you.
been easier to vote. It's
Okay.
never been easier to vote. In Florida, you can now vote by mail for any reason. You can vote, for example, 10 days before the election. You can vote on Election Day. In Georgia, which they claim to be the place that was suppressing all the votes, you had record African-American voter turnout. To compare what's happening now to the Jim Crow era, where people were literally murdered, where people were forced to take poll taxes and pay poll taxes and literacy tests, what are we talking about here? We're talking about this. We're talking about, number one, when you go vote, you show an ID. I have been a Hispanic man my entire life. I'm a minority. I've never felt like producing an ID disadvantages my ability to vote. Everyone has an ID. You can't even check into a hotel. You can't buy Sudafed at Walgreens without an ID. That's number one. Number two is you can't collect a bunch of ballots. Harvesting of ballots. Cars showing up with tons of ballots sitting in the trunk of a car. Things like that, that they want to force down the throat of every state in the country. We don't need that federal law imposed on every state. Florida has very good election laws, and other states have very good election laws, and the states that don't have very good election laws are the states that actually have gone in the opposite direction of weakening security for the ballot.
All right, Senator, thank you. Congressman, I want to go back to you for 60 seconds.
Florida has an election law police force, and if the laws are so wonderful, what's the need for that? Florida also eliminated the number of drop boxes from 2020. Why do that, particularly in certain areas, Senator? Your job is to make sure that every person votes. The ones who may vote for you and the ones who may not vote for you. That is your responsibility. So if it's so perfect, why the adjustments? We need to hold states accountable to make sure every person, although that scares the senator to death, has the right, the precious right, to cast their vote.
Senator.
Yeah. I'm trying to suppress the vote, and I'm wasting a lot of money telling people to go out and vote, because that's what my campaign has been all about. Number two, I've never supported any suppression effort. Listen, we've had laws in this state. How come all of a sudden a drop box is the standard by which we judge whether people are being allowed to vote or not? We didn't have drop boxes 10 years ago. We didn't have drop boxes in 2016 when the Congresswoman was first elected to Congress. We didn't have drop boxes in 2012 when Barack Obama won the state of Florida running for president. That's a method of voting that doesn't advantage one group or another. There's danger involved in drop boxes. People need to think about it. Okay, imagine if someone decides, oh, there's a drop box. I'm just going to put some explosive in it and blow it up and burn all of those ballots, and now those votes don't count at all. Okay, there is something, with elections, there are two things that are very important. Number one, the count has to be accurate. The votes have to be counted accurately. But the other is there has to be public confidence. The public has to believe that the elections were fair and balanced, and that's what I've always been in favor of. But what they want is a federal takeover of the elections. I do not want a federal takeover of our election system. I oppose it.
That's time, Senator. Congresswoman?
That's nonsense.
Okay.
That we want a federal takeover. We passed the Voting Rights Advancement Act in the House of Representatives because of the unbelievable voter suppression efforts that were going on by the senator and his party.
Well, which voter
Let
suppression vote was that?
people vote. That's nonsense, what he just said. We want every person to vote. And Senator, we've been busy too, encouraging people
That's
to
time,
vote. It
Congresswoman.
doesn't threaten me. It doesn't scare me to
Congresswoman,
let the people vote.
and that's time. I want to move on to another issue. We are coming close to the end of the debate. I want to make sure you both get all your time for closing statements. This is going to go to you first, Congresswoman. The Biden National Security Plan identifies Russia as an imminent danger and China as the greatest long-term threat. Given President Xi's comments Monday that included threats to Taiwan, what should U.S. policy be with China moving forward from here?
We've got to hold China accountable. We've got to hold them accountable for the violations of our intellectual property. We've got to hold them accountable for, look, the bottom line is the United States is the world power. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We know that China has not been the best player, the best actor, and we have to hold them accountable. What President Xi said about possibly taking Taiwan by force, that is totally against our principles and our values, and we have to take action. If there's any serious effort to do that. Look, I serve on the Intelligence Committee as well as the senator does. That is something that we have been monitoring just about every day. If China makes any aggressive actions, deliberate actions to take Taiwan, then there has to be a response from the United States.
Senator?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that there's a fact, every major anti-China proposal that has been voted on in the last 5 years have been my bill. So much so that China has actually sanctioned and banned me. And I was very upset about that because I had to cancel my vacation in Wuhan. So, but all kidding aside, the 21st century will be defined by the relationship between the United States and China. We wasted 20 years thinking that once China got rich and prosperous, they would become like us, and we woke up into a world where they don't want to become like us, they want to replace us. We made one mistake. Number one, we allowed American manufacturing to leave this country and go to China. And so today, they own the manufacturing capacity. 88% of pharmaceuticals come from there. So that's why I've worked on things like bringing the pharmaceutical industry back to the United States, particularly Puerto Rico, and I have a bill that will do that. The second thing is we have to begin to invest in our military, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, to defeat the weapon systems they're innovating. We don't need the Pentagon spending all its time producing videos on the proper use of pronouns. We need them focused on how to blow up aircraft carriers made by China.
Thank you. Congresswoman, number 30 to you.
The bottom line is we have to hold China.
I'd ask the audience to please respect the candidates' statements.
The bottom line is we have to hold China accountable. And your question involved their takeover of Taiwan. We have to make sure that that does not happen. And as a member of the Intelligence Committee, that is an issue that we are studying every day to make sure that does not happen. Look, the senator can play national security expert all he wants. I know he needs that for his next presidential run.
Congresswoman, I need to stop you there, and I want to give, because you mentioned the senator, another 30 seconds to the senator.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what she means by play national security expert. I'm the vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee and was the previous chairman of it, so it's actually my job. But the second thing I would say is I think holding China accountable, that's a talking point. I get it. I'm supporting the concept. It's a great banner. I'm sure it's a good bumper sticker. But it's not a plan. I actually have a detailed plan for how you address it. And one of the things we have to do, you want to hold China accountable, fix this country first. Make things in America again. Because you think things are bad now? Imagine the day you wake up and realize we can't get medicine because the Chinese have cut us off.
And then I
we
need
can't
to
get
stop
gas
you
because
there.
they have all the
I need to cut
refineries.
you off, Senator. 15 more seconds to the
Senator
Congresswoman.
voted against the CHIPS Act. He goes around the state talking a lot about our dependency on China because of semiconductors, and then he voted against the CHIPS Act. That would help further America's independence.
And that is time for both of you because you're going to get it's a gift, full time for closing statements. Senator Rubio, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for hosting this debate tonight. I'm glad people got a chance to see that elections are about a choice. Look, I've been in Washington now for 2 terms in the Senate, and in the 2 terms I've been there, no U.S. senator has gotten more done than I have. Today, parents in Florida whose child have pediatric cancer will have options because I took on the pharmaceutical companies and passed the bill that forced that. The child tax credit doubled because I passed the bill that did that. Veterans that were exposed to toxic burn pits will now get treatment at the VA and not have to fight with the VA because we just passed a bill that I sponsored, all these bipartisan, to make that happen. And millions of American small businesses and millions of American small business jobs were saved because of a bill we passed. And so I'm asking for a chance to continue that work because I have a record of not just identifying the problems, but fixing it. And my opponent has been in Congress now for half a decade and has never passed a single piece of legislation into law, not one. The only thing she does is vote 100% with Pelosi. The vote is clear, and I'm asking voters for their support. Thank you.
Right on time, Senator. Congresswoman Demings.
Todd, I wasn't going to start my closing arguments with the last couple of things the senator said were just not true. And let me say this. I stand on this stage tonight as the daughter of a maid and a janitor. Had the awesome honor of being the first in my family to graduate college, served at the police department, worked my way up through the ranks to become the chief of police, serving in the House and now running for the Senate. Only in America is my story possible. I just happen to believe that every person, regardless of who they are, deserves the opportunity to succeed, deserves the opportunity to make it. The senator will pick and choose winners and losers based on their ability to pay to play. He talked about pharmaceuticals. He voted against legislation that would help reduce the cost of prescription drugs and help cap the cost of insulin.
That is time. Senator, Congressman, thank you both so much for participating in this. We want to thank our audience across the state of Florida and on the internet right now for this. This will also be rebroadcast on C-SPAN. Election Day is November 8th, and early voting begins next week. Thanks for watching. Good night.
The issues between Val Demings and Senator Marco Rubio, debating at Palm Beach State College, and doing so in front of a live audience and you watching at home across the state of Florida and around the world. Hello there to you folks. JB here with you live on WFLA Now. You can see there in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, we have poll results coming your way in approximately 13 or so minutes. 13 and a half minutes. You see there in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. We're going to explain how to vote in just a second. We're first going to publish the QR code as we have on standby Tom Lee and Jim Davis. The link is coming to the YouTube Live comment section in just a moment here. But you can scan the QR code on your screen to vote in our exclusive WFLA.com poll as to who you think won this debate between incumbent Senator Marco Rubio and challenger Congresswoman Val Demings. We're going to get into this, and let's bring in our two guests joining us again, Tom Lee and Jim Davis, who were here with us before the stream began. Tom, why don't we go to you first here? Your biggest takeaway and who you thought. Now, guys, you're the Republican analyst. You're the Democratic analyst. That doesn't mean that you can vote any which way. Who you thought got the upper hand tonight?
Well, I tell you, my first reaction was reminded of just how challenging and how much respect I have for people that run for office. This was great that Floridians got to see this debate on stage between these two candidates tonight. You know, my takeaway, I thought that Representative Demings was rattled a few times early on. I thought she recovered fairly well. You know, people don't always remember what you said, but they remember how they felt about what you said. And I think there were times when she was too aggressive, too much of a name caller. I think Senator Rubio had a command of the subject matter, particularly foreign policy, and I thought he was unflappable. And I think in terms of the 30,000-foot level, looking at this individual policy questions aside, I thought Senator Rubio looked like the more polished and more prepared individual to lead Florida in the United States Senate.
Jim, what do you think?
I think Senator Rubio was polished. I just think he was too polished. I think if you're looking for authenticity, I think you got to see Val Demings in full tonight. She is a fighter. People will disagree on whether she's aggressive, but I'll tell you, having stood on the floor of the United States Senate, Florida needs a fighter because we have to get the rest of the country to work with us, and we've got to work with them. And I think Representative Demings also demonstrated the composure which is needed in a collegial body like the United States Senate. One of the things also was important, I think she got a chance to say where she stands and who she is, as opposed to just the sloganeering that was going back and forth. So I think one of her main assignments tonight was to introduce herself and show people what she stood for, and I think she did that. I think she showed a lot of grace and a lot of grit.
Let's come back on screen here for just a second, and we're going to hear more from Jim, hear more from Tom here in just a second. We take our polling very, very seriously on WFLA.com, so we publish the poll as soon as within seconds of the debate coming to an end as far as the closing statements there from both Demings and Rubio. You'll see it now in the WFLA YouTube Live comment section. It is now officially in the pinned comment. I'll ask our moderators to use this link as well. We're not going to be running a YouTube Live poll or a Facebook Live poll. We want you to go quickly over to WFLA.com, cast your vote on who you thought won, not who's getting your vote now, but who you thought won tonight's debate. You can be a supporter of Senator Rubio or Congresswoman Demings and vote the other way if you thought that one of them had the upper hand tonight. So you can click on the link that our moderators are pushing out here as well. It'll take you over to WFLA.com. It takes less than 5 seconds to vote. It's a one-click poll, no sign-up or email or phone number required. And then we'll come back in about 9 minutes and 35 seconds to display the results here live on WFLA Now. We talked, Tom, Jim, about whether or not the debates were going to, or excuse me, the issues in tonight's debate were going to be at the center of the conversation. And hopefully there was going to be a minimalizing of attacks. Who do you think focused more on the issues tonight? I think it's fair to say that it was more of an emotionally charged night for Congresswoman Demings. I think that the way that she was looking over at Senator Rubio, talking to him directly, and just her demeanor on stage tonight was perhaps more emotionally charged than Senator Rubio's was. But as far as sticking to the issues, bringing up solutions, things that resonate with voters, Jim, we'll start with you. Who do you think kept the train on the tracks more, so to speak?
Well, I think there was not enough discussion about the economy, and particularly not enough discussion about solutions. And I think that's what the voters are interested in more than our policy with China and Russia, which is important. But I think what happened was the abortion issue became a very defining issue of this debate. And for people that don't think it's the most important issue, it still was an opportunity to see how these candidates acquitted themselves. And Senator Rubio did not answer a couple questions, and Representative Demings went on the attack to make it clear that she will be someone who will tell you where she stands, whether you agree with her or not. And her position was that he wasn't doing that. And I think that's a defining characteristic people are looking for in the voters. They don't expect you to agree with them all the time, but they want to know where you stand.
Tom?
Well, I think that's fair. Passion is important, and Representative Demings had a difficult assignment tonight. She's down in the polls. She had to come out and attack, and she had to express her passion for some of these issues. But if you're not careful, passion can look like anger. And the voters aren't looking to elect an angry person to represent them in the United States Senate. And I think she stepped over the line when she was calling Senator Rubio a liar and a cheater and, obsessed with women's bodies and things of that nature. I just thought it was a little too much down in the dirt. And I didn't think it reflected very positively on her. As far as the issues are concerned, I think this was too much of a backward-looking conversation instead of a forward-looking conversation about the future of our state. I thought there was too much focus on foreign policy, which did not give the candidates enough time to talk about the economy and the direction they were headed. So I was a little disappointed in that. But overall, I thought Senator Rubio did a fine job defending why he deserves another term in the United States Senate.
I think that a lot of the based on our poll results that we talked about before our coverage began tonight of the actual debate itself, or really, in our pre-debate streaming coverage, we talked about how inflation and the economy were going to be, that's perhaps the top issue with Floridians. Abortion was going to be significant as well. Housing costs was something that wasn't really directly talked about tonight. Property insurance was. Election confidence was brought up quite a bit, as well as 2 questions on international affairs. So obviously, look, we got the questions that we got. We were able to get some somewhat concise answers. I think Tom is nodding his head because there were some moments tonight where it was very obvious that despite the moderator's best efforts, that getting a direct response to a very, very simple question was something that it just wasn't as simple as you would have hoped with our candidates tonight. But let's get to some of the comments that are coming in. And again, you can use any of the hashtags on your screen, hashtag AJB, Tom, or Jim, and we can feature your comments just like this. Fly says, hashtag AJB, Rubio schooled her in this debate. I'm still on the fence, but he won this round. Fly is indicating here, Jim, that he is, or she is, or they are, an independent voter, basically saying I'm still on the fence, or at least that's what you're led to believe with this comment. But saying that, thought that Rubio won this round. Here's the most important thing about, you say this round almost like a boxing match. There's only one round, really. This was the only debate tonight, or the only debate between these 2 candidates. So, Jim, do you agree with the commenter here that Rubio schooled Val Demings?
No, I don't. I mean, I think you could say he won the debate. I don't think that's the case, but I understand why some people might. I think it is fair to say that he does know foreign policy to a point because he spent a lot of time on that. And I think Representative Demings held her own. But I think when we got back to the issues that are more important to Floridians, which are what are going to be some of the solutions to deal with property insurance, how are we going to strike a balance dealing with the abortion issue, I think Representative Demings held her own. And I'm just hopeful that a lot of undecided voters saw tonight what I've seen in Representative Demings, which is a person of deep conviction, someone who is very serious. I think Senator Rubio came across a little glib. At a couple of points, he said he was going to win the race. That's not something anybody should say in the middle of a heated debate.
Tom, do you agree with Fly?
I do. I'm sorry. I just feel like at the end of the day, people walk away from these debates with an impression. And the impression you're left with is that Senator Rubio was under attack. He picked up the blitz very well, to use a football metaphor, and he handled Representative Demings very well and showed a command of the subject matter in an unflappable way. And I think that's what you're looking for when you look at scoring points in a debate. So I think it's I think he did exceptionally well.
Let's put away. We're coming to Fupa's comment here in just a second on YouTube Live. Let's put away Fly's comment and remind our audience that there is now a pinned link in the YouTube Live comment section. You can also scan the QR code here on the right side of your screen. This is the last call for your votes before we talk about the results. I am watching the results coming in. The two of you are going to be very fascinated by the results that we have coming in on, again, not who you're voting for, not who you think is going to win on Election Day, but who you think won the debate tonight. The link is in the pinned comment on YouTube Live. You can also scan, again, the QR code here on the right side of your screen to vote in our one-tap, one-click poll. No sign-up required. Just hop on over there to WFLA.com and come right on back as we reveal the results here to you. Though even if you vote right now, you might actually see the results populate on your screen. Let's go to Fupa's comment. Hashtag HeyJB. Pretty boring debate. Neither stuck out to me. Look, I'm going to disagree. I actually thought that this was an intellectual debate. I thought that we did get some interesting sort of dynamic that, came out here as far as Val Demings quite clearly being on the offensive here, attacking Rubio's character on numerous accounts, especially in the first half of the debate. Rubio then pivoting a bit, looking over at Val to start to assert himself and defend himself. But either of you guys believe that this was a boring debate? Because I actually thought it to be quite interesting.
So I guess that's Fupa, who really likes a lot of excitement. Probably should have watched the hockey game tonight, depending on the score.
Maybe I can ask you this. Jim. Has Donald Trump just changed the debate expectations forever in this country?
Look, in fairness to this particular voter, I think what she's probably saying is the issues that she cares about were not addressed. And there were plenty of issues, looks like a young person, that were not addressed that affect her life. Her livelihood, ability to afford college and afford housing. We really didn't get into that tonight. But I think if you watch the debate, take a close look at what you saw on the stage in terms of what you saw about the character of the man and the woman with respect to the issues you do care about. But I think this was a pretty high energy debate.
How about this comment that just came in a moment ago from Janelle? Hashtag HeyJB. Val won on the issues, but Rubio seemed more composed. Tom, I'll give you a chance to respond here.
Well, first thing, that previous respondent, they're clearly an MMA fan if they didn't think this was very exciting. And more power to them. I think this latest comment is more a reflection of what an individual subset of issues were, what issues were important to them. I think they're otherwise making the same observation I'm making, and that is that Senator Rubio seemed very polished and composed and in command of the subject matter. He probably didn't have the answers that she wanted, and that happens, and you can't be everybody's candidate. But I thought he handled and defended his positions on these issues very, very well. I was very proud of him.
I'm going to ask now for the two of you, and I'll put you both on screen because I'm gonna go off camera here for a second to load our poll results. The most interesting moment for each of you, respectively. What you thought, what got your eyebrows to raise the most over the course of this debate? Jim, why don't we start with you? Was there a particular moment where you were a bit surprised or you leaned back in your seat and you or something that you think really stood out and resonated with voters watching in Florida?
Yeah, there was. One of the major criticisms of Senator Rubio is you don't know where he stands. That's not fun having to criticize a sitting United States senator. But I think Representative Demings wasn't going to let him get away with that. And she was tough. But she called him out on a number of issues, including the abortion issue, where he really would not say where he stood. She's tough. She's tough.
Tom, what do you think?
Well, I had two things. One, I think the first thing that stood out at me was how personal Representative Demings made this on occasion, attacking Senator Rubio personally. I don't think there's any place for that in the public square, but it certainly has become more apropos of late. The second place I thought really stood out with me was Senator Rubio's command on foreign policy when she attacked him for purporting to be an expert, and he put her in her place as basically pointing out that he in fact was an expert and had assignments in the United States Senate that required him to be an expert, and I thought he handled that very well.
Yeah, there was a lot of comments. I think it's fair to say, based on our social media comments, that we saw more support from Val on the first side of the debate, before halftime, as they put it, and then the second end of the debate, we started to see a little bit of a recovery there from Marco Rubio, at least again in respect to our commenters, because perhaps, Tom, to your point, perhaps it was because we got a couple of foreign policy questions in there as well. All right, is everybody ready for our poll results? You can still vote, and let me point this out. I want to remind our audience, because this is still going to update on your screen. You can you can click on the link in the description on this video. You can click on the link in the polled comment, or the pinned comment, or scan the QR code here on the right side of your screen to still vote. But I want to bring up your poll results now as to who you think won the debate between Marco Rubio and Val Demings. And this is coming in a moment ago from WFLA.com. Let's show it to you here on your screen. And it's kind of cut off because this is loading up. But in red is Marco Rubio, and in blue is Val Demings. 56% of our poll respondents thought that, at least as far as the debate tonight, the winner was Val Demings. Pretty close as far as just a few percentage points being away from 50-50. Jim, your response to our poll respondents saying that Val Demings was the winner of tonight's debate.
Well, I think she won too. But I think what's most important is she really got to introduce herself. She got to point out who she is, where she came from, where she's going. And I think she got to point out what are the most credible criticisms of Senator Rubio. And what will be key going forward is whether this attention to her and the race continues. And if it does, she's now got some momentum, which she needs. And I think she does have.
Tom, your response to a majority of our respondents saying that Val Demings was the winner tonight.
Well, I'm not that surprised, and I'll tell you why. Understanding the mix of the electorate and the nature of this broadcast, it is likely a fairly young audience. I'm pretty familiar with a congressional campaign that's going on in our area, as you know. And in that primary, the average voting age, sadly, was 65. That was the average age of the voter. And 65-year-olds don't, know a lot about QR codes. At least this 60-year-old doesn't. So, look, I think, rational people can disagree on this. A lot of this may be issues-based, but I suspect that this is a reflection of a fairly young online audience.
Okay, so Tom's theory is that our audience is younger. The only way.
It's a compliment, by the way.
Yeah,
Take
there
it.
you go. I like that. And you know what? What's the great thing about the work that we do, Tom and Jim, is that unlike TV, we can just ask our audience to let us know exactly how old they are. So look, you gotta play Honor Scout here, okay? Let's ask our audience. Give us a rough age, not how old you feel, but let's actually get your actual age here. Let us know what you think as far as, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about it. But let's see the ages come in here, Jim.
I want to go with what Tom said, because if you watch this debate, you care. You passed up the hockey game or something else to watch. True. And I think Tom's absolutely right. It really matters who shows up. And I think one of the challenges for both candidates is whether voters show up. And we have a large number of independent voters in this state. They tend to be late breakers. And I think this debate gave them an excellent opportunity to see the character of both candidates and get out there and vote.
I think we've got, look, I'm reading the comments as they're coming in about the age, and they're all over the place. But I'm seeing a lot of 40s, 50s, and 60s. So you guys can take that for what you want. It's not scientific. These poll results aren't scientific, by the way. It's not as if we're running this through a pollster. It's an unscientific website app-based poll on WFLA.com. And we'll come back to these results perhaps in a few more minutes. Do you feel that anything was left on the table tonight? Is there something that you really wanted to hear from each one of our candidates that you felt like, if we had another 10 minutes, I would have asked this? Jim, I see you're nodding your head. What do you think?
I think the prescription drug issue is a huge issue in Florida. And having spent 10 years in Congress, this was a historic defeat for the pharmaceutical industry. And we did not get to hear Senator Rubio explain why he did not support the discount. I think that's a very important issue. You got to hear Representative Demings say she strongly supported it and criticize him. But I think this is something that the voters deserve to hear more about in the coming days.
Let's remind our audience that we're going to spend the next 10 minutes with our two experts, Republican analyst Tom Lee, Jim Davis, Democratic analyst here in Florida. They both bring, if you combine it all together, you guys, it's decades worth of experience in Florida politics. Believe me, these two know what it is like to be on that stage tonight, what it is like to be asked tough questions and be asked for simple answers. And at times, perhaps you guys can enlighten us, enlighten me, because at times you're asked point blank a question and you just don't give an answer. Let's focus on abortion for a second. When the answer was, the question was to Senator Rubio, can you give us that assurance that over your 6-year term you would vote one way or another when it comes to no exception abortions, Tom? And Senator Rubio did not give a clear black and white sort of answer. Were you surprised? And why is it so difficult in those moments to just look into the camera, look at your moderator and say, this is how I feel?
Well, it's not deception. What happens to candidates is that their position is out of touch with reality of what can happen in the United States Congress or what their constituents believe. This is a representative democracy. I have known Marco Rubio for 20 years, 25 years, and I know how passionate he is on the sanctity of life. I understand where he's at as a Catholic, and yet that's not where America is. And so, when he's saying that he is supporting Lindsey Graham's bill, it's because he would support Lindsey Graham's bill, and he would support something probably more conservative than Lindsey Graham's bill. But something more conservative than Lindsey Graham's bill is not going to happen in the United States of America. It is not going to happen in Florida. America is too far down this path, and we're not going to come back to, a time where abortion is illegal and people are being put in jail for it. We have a 15-week abortion law that's on the books here in Florida. It does not include some of the exceptions that I think are important to consider, but it's 15 weeks. And I think most Americans are supportive, oppose abortion, but they support a woman's right to choose, but they want a woman to make up her mind. And I'm always felt sort of uncomfortable talking about these because I'm a man and I'm not the expert on this subject. But I think it's tough for candidates when their positions are either too conservative or too liberal for the average voter, and they want to try to support a compromise, and then they're called out for being willing to come to the center, support a compromise, even though their position might be more conservative or more liberal.
Jim, do you have anything to say before I move on to the next comment?
I agree with Tom. These are tough issues. That's why we have a United States Senate to make these difficult choices. And there are legislators around the country that don't want to just ban abortion completely. They want to ban contraceptives. I mean, you've got legislators using some medieval terms. And I do not think Senator Rubio provides the confidence tonight or in the past that he'll stand up to that. And I think that's what worries people. And you heard the same thing on the gun issue. At some point, you got to take a stand on some of these issues, even though it may not be the most popular thing to say or do.
Let's bring up Brian's comment here on YouTube Live. Any of the hashtags on the red stripes around your screen, and we can animate it on screen just like this. Brian is saying hashtag KJB. Val Demings more interested in passing more restrictions on law-abiding Second Amendment rights than dealing with criminals and enforcing the laws already on the books. This is Brian being critical of Val Demings, who again won our interactive poll, or at least, look, we're still collecting votes. We'll perhaps revisit that here in just a moment. But Jim, talking about this was something that came up. Really, I think it was the first question after the break, talking about, and this was a section that got particularly interesting because of Florida's history, terrible, tragic history when it comes to gun violence. Brian here with a very, very critical comment. Marco Rubio standing firm on saying that there aren't any solutions that have been put forth by Democrats across the country that would, in his opinion, yield any considerable results in preventing any current, past, or future gun violence in this country. This was a big moment in this debate, and we didn't have an opportunity to we didn't really talk too much about gun laws in this country in our pre-debate stream. So what do you make of Brian's comment? What do you make of that particular interaction tonight between Demings and Rubio on gun violence?
So if it's to me, I think there is a disagreement between Brian and the Congresswoman on this, what the scope of the Second Amendment. And but listen very carefully, Brian, to what she said. I did. She said dangerous weapons in the hands of dangerous people. And this is somebody who served in law enforcement. She knows how to assemble and disassemble a firearm. She knows how to use deadly force appropriately. And I think she was referring to a ban on assault weapons, which has been proven to reduce incidents involving assault weapons in a study that was done when the law was in effect. So I think we do need somebody who respects the Second Amendment, also recognize what it does and doesn't do. And I think Brian just doesn't agree with Representative Demings' position. But the fact she's been in law enforcement and used deadly force tells me that she knows how to address this issue.
Yeah, and Tom, this question comes back to as Jim just mentioned, we're talking about somebody who has a lengthy and well-noted law enforcement background, Val Demings serving as the police chief in Orlando. So this was a very, very particularly interesting moment in this debate.
It was. And, a lot of focus was on the Florida law that was passed here in Florida. And, it's funny how laws can get labeled and presumed to say things that it doesn't say. There's not a law in Florida that prohibits an 18-year-old from owning a rifle. There isn't. There's only a law in Florida that prohibits them from buying one. You can get one for Christmas. You can find one. You can have your friend buy them. Imagine we had a law on buying beer for 18-year-olds that said you couldn't buy it, but you could possess it and drink it and use it. That's what our law says. And we got a lot of credit and a lot of brownie points for passing it, but it did nothing and it does nothing. That's not to say that there aren't opportunities to deal with some of these issues. Justice Scalia himself said that the Second Amendment is preeminent, but that there is the ability to pass laws that limit and infringe to a point where public safety can be demonstrated. So, just how to build consensus around these issues, I really don't know. It's very, very challenging, but there's no question that these are tough subjects on how to actually solve a problem, as opposed to try to put a soundbite together for a debate.
Our audience has indicated to me on YouTube Live some commenters are having difficulty voting in our poll, and we understand that there's a lot of interest in voting in that poll. I just retweeted on my WFLA JB account on Twitter. I retweeted the poll. So if you're having difficulty clicking on it out of the YouTube Live comment section, hop over to Twitter really quickly. You'll find that poll and the link to the poll on either the WFLA Twitter page or the WFLA JB Twitter page. I think that there are a lot of people that are still trying to vote, and we will try to come back to the results here again in just a moment. Jim, I want to talk to you about really quickly, or not so quickly. You can take as much time as you'd like. That's the beauty of doing interactive streaming. We have all the time in the world. But we are going to get going here in about 10 minutes' time. But I want to ask you about what Matthew Ellis is going to be popping up here on screen with. And it talks about Val Demings' demeanor tonight. This is something that I'll read this comment here in just a moment. But her emotions tonight coming through, I think in a way that for us, I think that we have seen this side of Val. The three of us have seen this side of Val before. However, for people maybe just watching Val Demings for the first time, this is something that they didn't foresee. So Matthew Ellis, #KJB, whenever a woman of color stands up and makes a stand, she is deemed, quote unquote, hostile. Demings was anything but. She put emotion into words many Floridians have been feeling. Nice to see the same anger. what Matthew is saying here is that Floridians have had frustrations. Floridians have developed anger with the percepted ineptitude with some of our elected officials. And some of the folks in our comment section are going to point at Marco Rubio for what some might describe as a lack of progress in Washington. Do you agree with Matthew's comment that it's easy to typecast her as being hostile, but this is just her voicing a lot of frustration and anger that has built up in Floridians for some time?
I agree it's easy to criticize her for being aggressive, but let's keep in mind fundamentally what's going on here. I mean, an incumbent has to be fired for cause. And so I think Representative Demings had no choice but to point out why she believes he needs to be replaced. And she had to take the position that he wasn't taking a position and call him out on that. And it wasn't fun to watch, at least for people that are trying to decide who to vote for as opposed to this being entertainment. But she did it. The other thing is, I think this is someone who feels very strongly about these issues. It's been a lifetime in public service and law enforcement, not in politics. And so when you're talking about the crimes of rape and incest, when you're talking about gun safety, this is someone who has walked the walk. And she feels very passionate about it. And the last thing I'll say is that I think what you also were hearing with the voice of thousands of Floridians tonight, because this has been a candidate who's been out on the road meeting with people. And you heard her, she's not just meeting with her supporters, she talks to everybody because that's what a senator should do. And a member of Congress represent everybody, not just the people that vote for you. And you're hearing her express the voice of many Floridians who are angry about what's happening in this country, who are feeling disconnected, feeling distraught, despondent about their way of life, about the future for them and their children. You heard that voice tonight.
Let's go to this comment. I have one coming in for you, Tom, and I want to bring this up on your screen. It comes from Jay Taylor. Hashtags for both of us. Do you think that the point about an 18-year-old and guns was really made clear during the debate? This is something, we were talking about, about the age of which you should be able or should be legally allowed to acquire a firearm in this country. We heard, the question asked and posed about, the AR-15 and assault rifles and what age should be appropriate for you to be able to purchase that gun in this country. Marco Rubio kept going back to the shooting that, of course, occurred with a shotgun. Jay Taylor wants you to answer this question.
Well, look, what I was commenting on is I thought that Representative Demings seemed to believe that Florida had passed a law that prohibited 18 to 21-year-olds from owning a rifle, a semi-automatic rifle, which are legal in Florida. We don't have such a law in Florida. A lot of people have characterized it that way because it works for them politically. But when you read the language, all it does is prohibit them from buying one. It doesn't prohibit them from owning one, getting one for Christmas. I've gone through the finding one, taking one out of their dad's gun cabinet. Nothing in that law prohibits that. It is not illegal to possess one. It is only legal to buy one. And that's a pretty ineffective law.
Let's go to this comment, and it comes in from Lamar Woodley, hashtag HeyJB, saying, thank you, Lamar. We really appreciate this because this provides us with some perspective. As an independent voter, Rubio won my vote tonight. It wasn't close. Rubio ran circles around Demings. Jim, I'm sure you're getting a little bit tired of answering this same question over and over again, but there are some in our comment section who I think perhaps they're really looking at Senator Rubio's demeanor again tonight and how he was the more calm party on stage, and whether or not optics-wise that leads people to favor Rubio more, or maybe I'm putting words into Lamar's mouth here. Maybe he's focused on the issues, but we're seeing some comments saying that Rubio won this in a landslide.
I guess I would just say we are a divided state right now. And right. We need somebody who can represent everybody, including the people that don't agree with them. And, you've got to respect the fact that Lamar watched the entire debate and came to a conclusion. And, I think that's what this election is going to be about, is the independent voters. I think Representative Demings clearly express the passion that a lot of hardcore Democrats wanted to hear. I think she struck the balance in what I've seen makes an effective senator, somebody who's willing to stand up and fight for what they believe in and earn the respect of their opponents, but also somebody who's collegial enough to work with people, separate the sin from the sinner, so to speak. But this is for the voters to decide.
Let's put away this comment and show our updated results on your screen here, folks. This is coming in from WFLA.com. Blue is Demings, red is Rubio, and it's still, despite us picking up, I think, another 1,000 votes, it is still now holding Rubio picking up a percentage point here, picking up 1 percentage point, but a 55-45 split, and this is going to be the last time we show our poll results on screen. So 55% unscientific poll, WFLA.com. 55% of respondents feel that Val Demings won the debate tonight, while 45% feel that Marco Rubio won the debate tonight. But it's all about getting out the vote. We're going to talk more about that here in just a second. But let me just really quickly point out that something that our two analysts have talked about a lot tonight, and I want to give you both the opportunity to talk about this because this is something that has really resonated with me with getting to just sit here with you tonight. Before the debate, before the stream began, during our pre-debate stream as well, you guys were talking about how much division there is in our country between our parties right now, between Democrats and Republicans, between left and right, liberal, conservative, red and blue. It's so polarizing right now, and we see it on social media as well. But the two of you both came in here tonight and were in a lot of areas agreeing, and it was really refreshing to hear a lot of your side conversation and some of the things that you really did agree on. So I want to just bring you guys both up here on screen and give you both the opportunity to talk as long as you'd like about the lack of unity that we have in our country between our two parties, and also too about how much you guys have been stand up tonight and seeing eye to eye on certain issues.
I guess already put the viewers to sleep tonight.
Yeah, well,
for the bedtime story.
I do like Jim Davis. I think he's a fine American.
Jim?
But no, listen, it is. There's no question to the voter earlier about how angry Americans are, frustrated they are. That is very true. I think there's a lot of that exists in our political culture today. But the truth is that we shouldn't blame politicians as much as we tend to blame them. We continue to reward this kind of behavior because of the primary system that we have. Each of these candidates have to come out of a primary where slivers of the electorate vote for them, and they're the most conservative and the most liberal slivers of their electorate in that party. And these general elections, in order to get through those primaries, they're designed in Florida to purify the breed, so to speak. And sometimes the general elections can become the lesser of two evils as a result of it. As long as we continue to reward that kind of system, we're going to continue to get this kind of behavior out of our elected officials. I think it's unfortunate. I wish the system would change, but nobody's going to make me king for a day.
Jim.
Well, first, let me just return what Tom said. I mean, Tom Lee has a very distinguished service in the legislature and earned the respect of a lot of people that didn't agree with him. And I think that's the mark of both statesmanship and leadership. And Lord knows we need leaders like that right now in the Washington State of the U.S. Senate. I think we've just got to have higher standards for who we sent to office and what we expect of them. Our standards have gotten way too low. I think it starts with the caliber of people that run, people that have life experience. And that's one of the things I like about Representative Demings. And then I think ultimately the greatest weapon against the ideology on both sides that Tom referred to is knowledge. You need people that really understands the issues. Again, I'll just talk about Representative Demings. She clearly has expertise when it comes to law and order. I mean, this is what she spent her life doing. She hasn't been a teacher. I'm sure she knows a lot about education too. She's been a mom and she's got some sons. I think they're in the police department. So she understands what it's like to care for a family and raise a family. And her husband is actually the mayor of Orange County, Orlando. So it's a dual working family. So I think we have just got to expect more. And I think if you're judging the debate tonight and you haven't made up your mind, think about whether these lawmakers are serious enough to understand the issues and show a command of the issues. And I'll go back to what Tom said. I think you got to give Senator Rubio some credit on foreign policy. He set out to learn that. But I think on many of the important issues facing Floridians, personal freedom, the economy, climate change, the environment, opportunity and respect, I think Representative Demings did well. But I think if she prevails, she needs to be somebody that treats everybody with respect, not just the people that agree with her. And I think that's the same measure for Senator Rubio. So we're getting what we expect, and I think we need to expect more.
Again, Jim Davis, Florida Democratic analyst tonight. Tom Lee, Florida Republican analyst, joining us tonight. Guys, we really appreciate your time. I'm going to lull our audience to sleep with another bedtime story as we're talking here about unity between the two parties. I'm going to lull our audience to sleep with the most basic and fundamental reminder when it comes to our rights as an American, and it is to vote. It is to vote on Tuesday, November 8th. It is so important for you not just to be an informed voter, regardless of your state, regardless of where you're watching from, not just to be an informed voter, but to actually then go out and execute your American right to cast a vote in this country. So Tuesday, November 8th is Election Day. And I think all of us on your screen, including Val Demings here in the center, and I'm sure Rubio here in just a moment, are going to echo that same message. Please get out and vote here in the state of Florida. Please get out and vote here in the United States. It is, of course, just the bedrock of American democracy. So WFLA.com, WFLA's app, and of course, WFLA News Channel 8 is your local election headquarters here in Florida. We take, of course, our responsibility to inform our voters and report on the facts surrounding the candidates very, very seriously. This is why, as well, that we bring in some of the best minds here in the Tampa Bay area, including Tom and Jim, to be able to break down what we're witnessing here and to provide some analysis as to the state of Florida politics. That's what Battleground Florida and your local election headquarters is all about. And all of this will live on WFLA.com and the WFLA app, as well as will our election coverage on election night. Again, that being Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. Tom and Jim are going to be hopping off stream because they are going to be doing quick interviews as to who they thought won the debate tonight for WFLA News Channel 8. Our broadcast coverage continues with Keith Cate, Justin Shecker, our entire team, of course, it's going to be reporting on all the happenings tonight at a Palm Beach State College. You'll see it in your 11 o'clock newscast on your NBC station, WFLA News Channel 8 on your side. You can also, of course, click on the link in the description on this video to go over to your local election headquarters, WFLA.com. And for those still looking to vote in our interactive poll who you thought won the debate tonight, you can scan the QR code here on the right side of your screen. You can also click on the link in the pinned comment here on YouTube Live. One last time, I'd like to thank my two guests here in the Stream Center tonight, Jim Davis and Tom Lee, for their respective analysis. It, of course, was a privilege, gentlemen. Thank you so very much. And again, the latest tonight on WFLA News Channel 8 and here on WFLA.com. Good night, everybody.